Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Connection Diaries. Today, I'm joined by Tom Knighton, who's a senior consultant with us at Conversant. And Tom, remind me how long you've been with us. How many years?
I have been with Conversant for about 7 years as an employee, but I have been connected to Conversant for the better part of 17 years.
All right. So well-versed in all things Conversant. And along with him, we have Bill Keeler, who is another member of the Conversant community, a Conversant partner, also well-versed in everything Conversant, member of our family and community, and an owner of Market Makers, which focuses on small business sales development. Correct? Anything else you want to say about Market Makers?
No, it's good. You did it well. Thank you.
Okay, great. So today we want to talk about sales teams and sales leadership. We haven't ever explicitly talked about how the Conversant point of view applies to that world, but we know it does and could likely make a difference. And you both have extensive experience working with sales teams and in business development, but you kind of come from different angles. So you want to maybe, Tom, start with you. What experience do you have? What do you think you have to lend here?
Well, I've certainly worked in the sales development space for many years, working with sales managers and salespeople from a training perspective. But I've also been a sales manager. So I led a sales team for several years. So have been in the trenches, have had to deal with all the things that sales management has to deal with, and so have both the kind of from a consulting perspective as well as just having been a sales manager for several years.
Awesome. And Bill, what about you?
Yeah, I'm an old school sales guy. I've been in sales and business development in one capacity or another for almost 30 years, both as a salesperson and then as a sales manager for the last 20, including the time here with Market Makers and the work we do. So well versed on both sides of that desk.
Yeah. So since we have you, we might as well learn something from you. And we want to talk about how, so at Conversant, we talk a lot about connected leadership. And there's another Connection Diaries that specifically talks about how we define that a little bit more in depth from a general sense. But for those that haven't joined us before and haven't heard us talk about it, Tom, would you mind letting us know, what do we mean by connected leadership?
Sure. It's probably easiest to understand connected leadership if you contrast it to what we call superior leadership. And many of us have experienced superior leadership in our lives. A superior leader believes that their primary role is to instruct the organization based on their own experience, based on their own knowledge, based on the way they come at the world of work. And so they believe that their job is primarily to be the smartest person in the room and to help others learn from their experience and to help others perform in the way that they have performed. And in sales leadership, we've all experienced that. Who gets promoted into the sales management role? Typically the best salesperson. So it kind of creates by definition this idea that so many sales leaders come in with this idea of being a superior leader, that their job is to take their experience and make sure that the people that work for them, behave and perform in the same way. Connected leadership are equally as smart, equally experienced individuals. It's just that they have a different mental model about what their role is as a leader. They believe that their job is to help their people make sense of the world around them, get connected to the issues, get connected to the strategies, get connected to purpose, and then they believe their role is to coordinate the brilliance of others, with this belief that their people have everything they need to be successful. Their job is to orchestrate that on their behalf so that they can free up their people to perform at their best and achieve the kind of results that they're capable of achieving.
Great, thank you. And so you alluded to it there, but how does that differ from traditional sales management? Bill, would you have anything to add to what Tom said?
Well, I think Tom brought a really interesting point about the Peter principle, about the last salesperson standing ends up being elevated to sales management one day. And it feels like the trajectory, you'd want if you're in a corporate environment. And yet a salesperson and being a leader are really very different skills. So I've rarely seen a great salesperson become a great sales leader as well. And I think it just has to do with who they are, what they've learned. And to Tom's point, it's true. A superior leader in sales management just comes at you with, this is how I do it. This is how you write a proposal. Oh, this is what you should say. It's a lot of trying to teach people how to memorize their history of being a great salesperson to do their job. And it rarely is effective. Tom used the word connected, very little connection, very little purpose shared of any kind. So you don't end up with really a team space in traditional sales teams. You end up with a collective of people working in their own silos, often doing it their own way, and either having a manager that's with them all the time, just riding them, telling them what to do constantly, lots of reports, lots of meetings, lots of corrective suggestions, or a sales manager who mostly stays back in his absence and tries to honor all that individuality, which still doesn't create any connecting at all of any kind.
When we've been addressing that a bit in the blog series that we've been sharing this month from a few different perspectives. So if people can go and read some of that, but what else do we have to say about what connected leadership could mean to the performance of a salesperson or a sales team? What would change, do you think?
Well, when we talk about the skills of a connected leader, there's a couple of key distinctions. One is that a connected leader believes that everything about their leadership beliefs starts with what's present. So how do they make themselves present to their people? How do they stay present to the marketplace? How do they help their people stay present to the market? How do they create presence with their customers? So everything starts with presence, and all improvement starts with presence. So they believe that fundamentally part of their role is to orchestrate that within their organization. Then secondly, they also believe that purpose causes results. So instead of setting goals, setting goals with people, or, we've all had these conversations with salespeople and said, what are your goals for the year? Well, I'm going to lowball you here, and I'm going to see if I can get you high here. We're going to see if we can kind of come with a number. I get a number that I never buy into, but that's the number that I'm going to perform to. And I'm going to make sure that I figure out ways to achieve that number. As opposed to, in a connected leader, certainly goes after, a number, certainly sets those kind of targets, but they believe what's more important is to make sure that their salespeople are aligned around purpose. What are they really trying to accomplish in the marketplace? And how does that purpose and the methods for going about it actually achieve results that are of a higher quality than just making sure you get the bottom line number? And then ultimately, a connected leader believes that the conversation is the work. So the conversations that they have with their people, the quality of those conversations, the timing of those conversations, do they know what conversation is important to have when? Those conversations are what ultimately drive the performance of their people and the performance of the business in the marketplace. I don't know, Bill, what would you add to that?
I love the idea that the conversations are the work, because I don't think it's that common for salespeople and their sales leader to have really vibrant, purpose-driven conversations. They're rarely about the alignment they should be working for, and more the sales manager trying to realign the salesperson to their goals, to their needs, to their way of doing things. And so I think it's a really valuable idea that if the conversation from the manager out to the team could also create some conversations among the salespeople, so they really act in collaboration towards something larger, results for any sales team in that space would be easier to come by, more vibrant, more repeat, richer, would be more enjoyable. And that's just not how it's been historically across this discipline.
Well, and it seems that more classically, the conversations that sales teams are focused on are the conversations they're having with their customers, more so than the ones they're having with each other. Mm-hmm. So I think we have something to say about that too, though. What would connected leadership do to the relationship between the salesperson or the sales team and the customers or clients that they're either trying to win or maintain a healthy relationship with?
Yeah, maybe I could use a story to illustrate that, Emma Rose. There's an individual that I was coaching a couple of years ago who was a very high-end sales executive. I mean, this is an individual whose customers are the likes of Walmart and Costco and other kind of organizations. And if you know anything about those organizations, you know that they have one goal in mind, and that is to get you as a salesperson to sell your products at the lowest price absolutely possible with as small a margin as possible. And so we were in the process of the conversations he and I were having, he was saying, He says, I'm working on this opportunity, but I just can't get them to get over the hump to get to a point where we can really close this deal in a way that actually works for them and works for us. And we took this idea that we have at Conversant, you may have heard about it, it's called the intersection. The intersection is simply a way of getting to an aligned point of view, basically. And we believe that it's a combination of saying, what are the facts on the table? What's the other person's view? What's my view? Where do those things come together? How do we focus on what we agree on? And then really problem solve around the edges on the things that perhaps we don't agree on. And we were talking, I said, have you gone through that? And have you kind of isolated it seems like there's all these things that are kind of flying around and you're trying to negotiate all these various points and you can't come to any kinds of conclusion. Have you thought about just building the intersection with them in the process of conversation? And he said, and we walked it through and he went out and then he actually did that in his next meeting with them. He said, let's just recap. Here are the facts. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here are the things that are present for you. Here's the pricing we put on the table. Now, let's just really talk in all of this. What things are most important to you? Sat and listened. And he said, here's the things that are important to our organization. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. So it seems like we agree on these 4 or 5 things. There's a couple things then that we just need to iron out. And when they were able to approach it that way, they were actually able to problem solve around the 2 or 3 things that were actually around the edges, as opposed to being able, trying to negotiate and deal with all this stuff that was flying around in this very complex sales situation. And so it was just using that simple way of thinking that is kind of at the heart of connected leadership that caused the conversation to be different and to be organized differently and to have a whole different tone in terms of partnership. And ultimately what it created was not just the deal, but it created this partnership between his organization and the client organization that has lasted, for several years now.
Well, there's such a difference there between like manipulation or following a script or something like that to get the outcome that people are trained to, but really discovering an authentic intersection.
Or what we believe it means to persuade somebody.
Right.
I always think it's like persuading through involvement. It's about how do I persuade somebody by bringing them into the conversation differently than trying to give them the better argument.
Persuasion through partnership. I like that. Bill, did you have anything else to add?
It's the partnership and the come together idea as far as the definition of intersection is so interesting for me, because if you take the 3 parties involved right before our sales rep goes out to see the client, you've got the client and you've got the sales rep and you've got the manager, and they're all a little afraid of each other in sort of a conventional sense. And everybody thinks the other 2 are working against them. The manager thinks the rep and the client are in cahoots and they're going to come back with a bad deal, and the buyer might fear that the company and the rep are against them, and there's the salesperson's got it going at both ends, and there's all of this lack of alignment. And I love the idea that if you could come together, if anybody could come together and say, this is what's important to us, if the manager and the rep aligned on that before the sales rep went out to see the client, they would leave a lot of space to bring a ton of opportunity for the buyer to see many ways to get into the intersection where all 3 could share. And that would be a whole different way of collaboratively serving one another and being in honor of those ideas that we all have purposes versus making sure I get my own, making sure I protect my own. And since Tom told the story, I want to make sure I get a good one in. So years ago, I had a meeting with a great client that I couldn't wait to go to. And the sales manager, who's a great friend of mine to this day, pulled me aside and he said, now, here's the deal, right? Let's go over what you're going to do, A, B, and C. You're going to say this off the script when they say that, all that stuff. And he said, and the bottom line is no less than this price. Like no matter what they say, you never go down below that. And so he made his purpose very clear. So I went to the meeting, came back to the meeting, and my manager pulled me aside, said, how did it go? I said, great conversation. Talked about A, B, and C. When he said that, I did this, all the things we talked about. He said, and you got the order? I said, no, we did not get the order. He said, how come? I said, he would not spend a penny more than that, which is below the number. And I held firm. He said, well, why didn't you just lower the price a little? We probably could. Instantly, an example of didn't even actually have intersection when I thought I had intersection, right?
Right.
how could a connected leader and a conversation that comes from that maybe better armed me and supported me going out, which would have armed and supported the client too.
Mm. Well, I have a bonus question that's come to mind. We have recently done our revisioning for the company. And one of the things we mentioned in our new vision at Conversant is that we are trying to set a new standard for leadership. So I'm curious, what impact do you think setting a new standard for sales leadership might have on the organization at large that they're a part of? Since part of our point of view on connected leadership is that it's not just what you're connected to amongst your team, but across your system.
Wow, what a great question, Emma Rose.
That is.
What comes to mind just off the top of my head is that, you know, I think the marketplace is getting tougher and tougher for salespeople. You know, unless you've got a killer product that is totally differentiated and you can ask a premium for it. I think margins are being squeezed at all fronts. I think it's tougher and tougher to sell and to be able to, create that kind of, economic opportunity for people. And so what creates differentiation, I think ultimately, is the quality of the partnerships that you create with people. Partnerships that are, we're not just talking, soft, fuzzy kind of relationships, but we're talking about partnerships where there is truly a mutual respect. And I loved how Bill talked about an honoring of each other in the relationship that causes you to come together in ways that really are mutually beneficial for the salesperson's company and for the customer. And so I really think that there's huge economic opportunity for those salespeople and sales managers that create a different kind of partnership. And I think it's up to sales leaders to set that tone. So when you talk about setting a new standard for leadership, it's about setting a new standard for the kind of relationships that companies can build with their partners and with other companies in what we have traditionally called the sales relationship. And so I think there is the opportunity for a new standard. I don't think that new standard is in place yet, but I do think that connected leadership provides that kind of opportunity. I don't know, Bill, what about you?
Well, I love the way you framed that. I think where it would land, like what landed on me was, wow, if that could start with sales leadership and become the manner for teams to work with that leader and with one another and take that out into the world for their best customers, what would really change is the customer experience. And if that were to be elevated, have more trust and more value and more relatedness, people would have those stronger partnerships Tom's referring to now with organizations. And as a result of that, everything would lift for everybody. And I think that's really where it lands, that the lack of this kind of conversation lowers the value of customer experience, which creates fear and adds to fear and all these other fights over things that aren't really about what it's all about, that could change the customer experience wholly and lift it forever.
Yeah, I love what Bill said, because he's talking about that connected leadership, I think, causes a shift in value, not just a shift in economics. And ultimately, I think that's what customers buy off of.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think we could keep talking about this for a really long time, which is why we did so in written form in some other blogs that we published this month. So you can see some more perspectives on how the Conversant point of view applies to sales management, sales leadership, and sales teams. And if you have questions that we haven't answered, please comment, reach out to us. We'd love to get some creative questions and get back to you. Any parting thoughts, Bill or Tom?
I would just add one other thing that we haven't talked about, because I keep thinking about a salesperson that I fired. And it's an individual I fired because it wasn't because this person wasn't effective in the marketplace. It was because when this person came back to make a proposal to get things done, they just left blood on the walls all over the organization. And I think about, not only does connected leadership create a different kind of relationship between a salesperson and their customers, but it creates a different kind of relationship between the salesperson and the team that has to support them, which is equally important in terms of creating the value that Bill was talking about.
That is so true. you know, what keeps landing on me is this word connected, because salespeople, as a rule, work in their own individual space. They're actually taught to and rewarded to and managed to, and it removes the opportunity for these connections with the other members of the company that are vitally important to the business development successes as well. So that's a really valuable point that Tom brings into this.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, you both. And we will see you all again very soon. Thanks for tuning in.